Welcome to this daily PBJ devotional. Read 2 Kings 5 and Daniel 9 today. This devotional is about 2 Kings 5. Now Naaman, the commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man in his master's sight and highly regarded, for through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. And he was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. At this time the Arameans had gone out in bands, and had taken a young girl from the land of Israel, and she was serving Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would go to the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." And Naaman went and told his master what the girl from the land of Israel had said. "Go now," said the king of Aram, "and I will send you with a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman departed, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. And the letter that she took to the king of Israel stated, "With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman, so that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and asked, "Am I God, killing and giving life, that this man expects me to cure a leper? Surely you can see that he is seeking a quarrel with me." Now when Elisha the man of God heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. "Why have you torn your clothes? Please let the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots, and stood at the door of Elisha's house. Then Elisha sent him a messenger, who said, "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be clean." But Naaman went away angry, saying, "I thought that he would surely come out, stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the spot to cure my leprosy. Are not the Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not have washed in them and been cleansed?" So he turned and went away in a rage. Naaman's servants, however, approached him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" So Naaman went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored, and became like that of a little child, and he was clean. Then Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God, stood before him, and declared, "Now I know for sure that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. So please accept a gift from your servant." But Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will not accept it." Although Naaman urged him to accept it, he refused. "If you will not," said Naaman, "please let me, your servant, be given as much soil as a pair of mules can carry, for your servant will never again make a burnt offering or a sacrifice to any other god but the Lord. Yet may the Lord forgive your servant this one thing. When my master goes into the temple of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my arm, and I bow in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord forgive your servant in this matter." "Go in peace," said Elisha. But after Naaman had traveled a short distance, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, "Look, my master has spared this Aramean, Naaman, while not accepting what he brought. As surely as the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him." So Gehazi pursued Naaman, and when Naaman saw him running toward him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and asked, "Is everything all right?" "Everything is all right," Gehazi replied. "My master has sent me to say, I have just now discovered that 2 young men from the sons of the prophets have come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 sets of clothing." But Naaman insisted, "Please take 2 talents. And he urged Gehazi to accept them. Then he tied up 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, along with 2 sets of clothing, and gave them to 2 of his servants, who carried them ahead of Gehazi. When Gehazi came to the hill, He took the gifts from the servants and stored them in the house. Then he dismissed the men, and they departed. When Gehazi went in and stood before his master, Elisha asked him, "Gehazi, where have you been?" "Your servant did not go anywhere," he replied. But Elisha questioned him, "Did not my spirit go with you when the man got down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to accept money and clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and oxen, men servants and maidservants?" Therefore the leprosy of Naaman will cling to you and your descendants forever. And as Gehazi left his presence, he was leprous, as white as snow. This is God's word. From the time Elijah was taken up to heaven in 2 Kings 1, God had been doing many miracles through Elisha. Widows, families who feared God, other prophets, and hungry people who were just standing around received the benefits of these miracles, as we read about yesterday in 2 Kings 4. But the king of Israel, Joram, the son of Ahab, had seen some of this miraculous power back in chapter 2, when God gave Elisha a message about how to defeat the rebelling Moabites. Look at 2 Kings chapter 3 for more information about that. The overarching purpose of these miracles is always to show that Israel's God is the true God. But, like most unbelievers in the Bible, the demonstrations of God's power had no effect on Joram's faith. In other words, he remained an unbeliever, even though he saw God work miraculously through Elisha. Here in 2 Kings 5, Naaman experienced the miraculous power of God through Elisha. God spoke through Elisha and gave instructions that healed Naaman's leprosy. Naaman was an unlikely recipient of God's healing grace in this chapter. He was an Aramean and a skillful fighting commander for the Aramean army, according to verse 1. This made him an enemy of God and God's people Israel, and someone the Israelites would have regarded as a heathen. Yet an Israelite slave girl loved him enough and believed in God's power so much that she persuaded Naaman to seek God's power for relief from his leprosy. The contrasts of faith in this chapter are striking. The slave girl had complete faith in Elisha, that Elisha would bring healing to Naaman, as we saw in verse 3c, which says he would cure him of his leprosy. The king of Israel, however, by contrast, freaked out when he heard what Naaman wanted, as we saw in verses 6 and 7. Even though he knew Elisha, remember back in chapter 3, verse 11, and he knew how powerfully God was working through Elisha, and again, you can see that in 2 Kings 3, 15 through 27. Joram had no faith that Naaman could be healed, despite seeing all of God's power at work through Elisha. Finally, after Naaman reluctantly obeyed Elisha's instructions, he came to believe in God and worship him alone. We saw that in verses 15 through 17, because he had experienced complete healing of a fatal disease. Jesus seized on this story in Luke chapter 4 to make a point about how God saves the unlikely. Jesus said this. These are the words of the NIV from Luke 4:27. "And there were many in Israel with leprosy in the time of Elisha the prophet. Yet not one of them was cleansed, only Naaman the Syrian." People can see God working up close and directly, yet without the gift of faith, they will not come and worship him alone. There are many people in our country who don't believe in God or that he works powerfully in this world today. These people live near churches. They know Christians. And some were even raised in Christian families. But they're oblivious to the power of God changing lives around them. Instead, it is often the irreligious that God saves. And in national terms, people who live in places with little gospel witness are coming to Christ as the gospel comes to them. Many of these people are ready for the gospel, and they will eagerly receive God's grace when you share it with them, or when a missionary comes to their land to talk about Christ. Are there areas in your life where you are missing out on seeing the power of God work just because you lack faith and aren't looking for God's works? Are there any people in your life that you don't share the gospel with because you're already convinced that they are heathens who won't listen anyway? What does this story in this chapter say about those attitudes? Think about it, and think about your life today, and we'll see you next time. May God bless you. Hope you have a great day today.